So I'm building this cabinet for my backyard and I have to glue up some panels. Now to help with alignment while I glue this up and to add a little bit of strength in here, I'm putting dowels in all these joints. Now of course to drill all my holes for my dowels, I am using my JessEm Doweling Jig. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to show you how to use this jig for perfect panel glue ups. So I've already done a few of these. Let me show you how this one goes together. And then I'll show you how I drilled all the holes and got them all to line up perfectly. This will be one glue up, but eventually this will be cut down the middle to make two separate panels. As you can see, I have the dowels in one panel and holes in the other. And if you just line these up, push them together, all the holes line up perfectly. And the boards are perfectly flush on the top and the bottom. Now this board will be glued to this one. I don't have any holes in either one of these yet. So let me show you how I got from here to here. So the first thing I do is I make some pencil lines on my edge where I want my dowels to go. You don't have to measure these. It doesn't really matter where they go. I just like to do kind of an appropriate number of dowels for how long the edge is and just evenly space them out. I know when this glue up is done, I'm going to be cutting this panel in half to make two separate panels. So I have 3 marks, one here, and one here for this first panel. And then 3 more here, here, and here for the second panel. And before I start drilling, let me show you how to set up the jig. So here is the JessEm Doweling Jig. It's pretty simple, but like all JessEm products, it's built really well and it's designed for precision. This plate and the fence are the main part of the jigs, and then the kit comes with 3 different inserts. And each insert has different size drill guides for different sizes of dowels. I'm joining 1/2" material today, so I'm using the 1/4" drill guide. So like I said, I have the 1/4" drill guide installed, and I have the jig set up so the center line is also at 1/4 inch. And what this center line setting is telling you is that the face of the fence is 1/4 inch away from the center line of your dowel. So I know using 1/2" thick material, the center of that thickness is 1/4 inch. So having the jig set up like this centers my dowel on my material. Now here's something very important when using this doweling jig, so don't skip this part. While the jig might be designed and built to be perfect, your piece of wood isn't. And what I mean by that is, with this setup, I am guaranteed that the center line of my dowel is 1/4 inch away from this face. But I'm not guaranteed that my piece of wood is exactly, precisely 1/2 inch thick. So it's a good practice to always reference this fence off of the same side of the 2 pieces of material. And what I mean by that is, if you put what's going to be the bottom of your panel against this fence on one board, then you're going to want to put the bottom of the other board against this fence as well. That'll ensure that the holes you drill will be the same distance from the bottom on both pieces. So when you slide those pieces together to glue them up, the faces will be perfectly flush. Alright, so let's see this process in action, and if you weren't quite following what I was trying to say, this should clear it up. Alright guys, I want to glue this piece to this piece. So I have my marks on here of approximately where I want my dowels to go. Now this is just what I chose. You could do more dowels, less dowels, you can put them wherever you want. It doesn't matter, there's no measuring here. You just put the number of dowels you want in whatever order or place you want. I'm going to reference my jig off of the bottom of the piece of wood. I usually use the center hole, but it doesn't matter. You can use any hole you want. You just line up the hole you want to drill in with your mark. And again, doesn't have to be precise, just be close to it. Just drill it out. Then move on down to the next one. And just like that, I have 6 dowel holes right where I need them. I don't worry about clamping the jig to the piece of wood. You could do that, but I've always just held it in place tightly and it's worked out fine. One thing I did want to mention is the kit comes with 3 different size drills with stop collars to correspond with each of the inserts. And to set your stop depth, you just insert the bit into the jig. And I just place the dowel I'm going to use on there like that. And I just drill a little over half the length of the dowel. Okay, so I have my holes in my first piece of wood, and now I need corresponding holes in this piece of wood that are in the exact same location as these holes so everything lines up perfectly. So how you do that is you lay your wood down, how it's going to be glued up, then you flip your first piece of wood on top of your second so they're face to face, and then you just stand it up. Now this is where you do want to clamp the pieces together, because you don't want to drill one hole here, have it shift a little tiny bit, and then you drill this hole, because then they won't line up. So I just line up one end, put a clamp on there. Once that's nice and tight, then I'll clamp the other end. Now I know these aren't going to shift, and it's important to note that my reference face, the bottom of each piece, is facing out. And now you just use this slot that's built into the jig to line it up with the existing hole. That way, these two holes will be perfectly in line. And you can do that two ways. You can put a dowel in there and use that for alignment, or the kit comes with these alignment pins, one in each size. Put your alignment pin in, put your jig on, hold it tight, and drill. And just do the same thing moving on down the line. Remember, it's important to hold everything tight. You don't want any bow or anything in these pieces of wood. You want them tight together. Once all the holes are drilled, you can throw some dowels in and do a test fit. There you go, perfectly aligned, front and back, perfectly flush, ready to be glued up. So using that jig is pretty quick and easy to glue up flat panels. But what if you wanted a joint like this? Maybe this is a side of a cabinet and this is a shelf, and you want it just to butt up against the side. You don't want to cut a dado in here. But you also want some hidden support so the shelf can handle some weight. Well, you can drill dowel holes into your shelf and then corresponding holes into your side piece. And if you do it right, the shelf will be perfectly flat and the edges will all line up. Let me show you how I did it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this with the 1/4 inch drill guide because that's what I'm set up for. But you could just as easily do this with the 1/2 inch drill guide or the 3/8 inch drill guide just by changing it out. It's the exact same process. You can see the size difference there between a 3/8 inch dowel and a 1/4 inch dowel. The 3/8 inch is quite a bit beefier and it's going to give you more strength. And to save time, I'm just going to reuse the shelf I already drilled. This is really simple. It's the same as drilling the holes for the edge glue up. I just mark how many dowels I want and where I want them to be. Again, no measuring required. It doesn't really matter. You can do as few or as many as you want. Then I set the center line of my jig to 3/8 of an inch, so my dowels will be centered in the 3/4 inch material. You just take the thickness of your material, divide it in half, and that's where you want your center line, or as close as you can get to it. Then I just put the jig on the shelf, and for this, I just use the 2 outside guides to drill my holes. As you can see, with the shelf installed properly, it's perfectly flat and level. The edges line up perfect. It's just right. But if I pull this out and flip it over, the dowels are going to line up with the holes, but now the edges are all cattywampus. They're way off, and that's not what you want. So I'm going to do new holes in a new spot to install this shelf upside down, and everything's still going to line up perfectly, just to show you that it doesn't really matter where you put your initial dowel holes. If you use the jig properly, everything will line up. So for this type of joint, there is some measuring involved to get the proper location of your shelf. Alright, so we have our shelf here. Let's say we want another shelf up here, for instance. I would place my shelf where I want it, move it over a little bit, and then mark the center of that shelf. That mark is going to line up with the holes we already drilled for our dowels. Then you want to measure 2 inches down from that mark. Now you insert dowels into the shelf you want to use, and I want it to go in this way, so I make sure to lay it down that way so my dowels are facing up. And then I clamp this in place on my 2-inch measurement. I make sure my edge is lined up, and I make sure my shelf is square. And once I'm happy that I'm lined up and I'm square, I'll clamp the other side. When I have it clamped in place, I'll just double check everything. Now the reason we measured 2 inches here and clamped our shelf in place is because if you look at the jig, you can see from this edge to the center of the dowels is 2 inches. And that's the same no matter which insert you have installed. Put any of the 3 inserts in and you'll have 2 inches from this edge to the center of your dowel. Now what I'm showing you here is kind of pretending that this side of your cabinet is a large piece of wood. It's not a small little piece of wood like this. So if this were a much larger piece of wood and you wanted to put this shelf in here, this is what you would have to do. You just undo this thumb screw here. Take the fence off. Then you just place the jig on the side of your cabinet using the dowel to align it. And when you do that, that puts the center of your dowel 2 inches away from your reference edge. Then you just drill it. And then you just move it to the next one. Now the first shelf fits this way and everything lines up perfect, and the second shelf fits this way and everything lines up perfect. So it doesn't really matter where you drill for the dowels, just as long as you keep the pieces oriented the proper way and everything lined up. Let's say this was the side of your cabinet and this was your top, and you didn't want to do a rabbet or a dado or anything. You just wanted it to be flush like this. You just take the piece that you already put dowels in and put it about 2.5 inches away from this top edge, and then clamp it down. And then square it up and clamp the other side. After it's clamped, I always double check it for square. Then you set your jig up with the same spacing that you already used on your first piece. Once that's done, you just align your jig with your dowels and drill your holes. You can take your clamps off and install your piece. You can see top is perfectly flush with the end. So I hope that gives you some insight on how to use the JessEm Doweling Jig. I see people using these and they're doing all kinds of marking and measuring, and you don't need to do that. You just need to drill your first set of holes and then use the alignment slot and the alignment pin or a dowel to line everything up to drill your corresponding holes. If you do it that way, it's very fast, very easy, and everything will line up perfectly. If you have any questions or comments about the jig, go ahead and post them below. Or if there's another type of joint you'd like to see done with the dowels, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.